Welcome everyone. My name is Amy and I'm the Arts Development Manager at Accessible Arts. For those of you who don't know us, Accessible Arts is the peak arts and disability organisation in New South Wales. We advance the rights of and opportunities for people with disability or who are deaf to develop and sustain professional careers in the arts and have equitable access to the arts and culture. I'd like to begin our event with a welcome to country from Daniel McDonald.
Oh, I don't know if I need to use this microphone. I'm not using my voice. I'm just going to put that down. So, my name is Daniel McDonald. I'm a proud Aboriginal deaf man. My mob comes from Wonnarua land on northwestern Hunter Valley. I have short, dark hair, brown eyes, and fair skin. My glasses have a blue frame, and I'm wearing a hearing aid. I'm also wearing a blue stripy shirt and blue jeans. I'm an artist. I work for the First Peoples Disability Network in Sydney. I'm also a member of the Sydney City Council Inclusion Disability Advisory Panel. I'm here today as a representative for the Sydney Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, and I'm here to welcome you to Gadigal country. Woolloomooloo is on the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to all Aboriginal elders, past and present, and I respectfully acknowledge any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, brothers and sisters here today. Doesn't matter which Aboriginal nation you come from, whether you are Indigenous or non-Indigenous, we're all still brothers and sisters. As we joyfully gather here today at this meeting place, it's only right that we honour the traditional custodians of these lands and the waters. Today, the 14th of May, 2024, we are here in Art Space. I would like to thank Amy Claire Mills for inviting me to the hybrid event series, Accessible Curation. We are looking forward to finding out about the amazing artists, performers, and curation practices under Accessible Arts. I'm so proud of you all here today on Gadigal land. On Gadigal land here today, there now stands another us. We are confident and proud, inclusive and diverse as a community. Today, it is time to come together and listen and focus on accessible arts. Reaching people with disability and potential, remembering the past with respect, acknowledgement and love in the present and with inclusion, understanding and hope for the future. The time is now. You can see my lovely artwork behind. I would like to tell you the story of this video, my artwork called The Time Is Now. Nobody knows what the time is now. So much to do, you think you can't cope. Always somewhere to go and someone to see. You juggle things around in your mind, all the things that you must do. Your mind can find the way to go. Sit down and think of your power. The time is now. Thank you very much. Thank you as well to the interpreter. Thank you, panel.
Thanks, Daniel, for that warm welcome to country and marking the official start of today's panel discussion. We're thrilled to be here today at Art Space, this fantastic revamped exhibition space which opened its doors again in December. It seemed only natural to partner with Art Space for this occasion, especially as our topic of today is about accessible curation. I would like to also say our hybrid series is made possible through the support of City of Sydney and Create New South Wales. I'm pleased to introduce Michelle Newton, the Deputy Director of Artspace, for an opening statement.
Welcome to country. Thank you. And I also wish to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation on the lands where Artspace stands, and to warmly welcome all Aboriginal and Torres Strait peoples here today. My name is Michelle Newton, as Amy said. I'm the Deputy Director here. I'm medium height. I've got short curly hair, brown hair. I'm wearing a white singlet today, and yeah, I'm really grateful to be invited to welcome you all. I'd also like to extend my welcome to everyone here and everyone who's participating on the live stream, and to say thank you to Liz Martin, the CEO, and to Amy Clare, and the Accessible Arts team for inviting Artspace to partner with them to present accessible curation as part of their Access, Ideas and Insights panel discussions. It's wonderful to have everyone here in our new multi-purpose space. As Amy said, we reopened to the public last year on the 15th of December after being closed for 2.5 years for a major refurbishment of this building. And a key part of the kind of changes to this building was really thinking about universal access, which means that people can move throughout the building in its entirety. This is something new to Artspace. It never existed before, but now this major structural change to the building means that we can really think about what accessibility and inclusion looks like. But we also acknowledge there's still a lot of work to undertake. There's a lot of learnings for the organisation in terms of our programming and our operations. And we've had many people feedback in the short time that we've been reopened, and we're really kind of listening and taking on board all those little sort of slight tweaks that we can make that will actually, have a kind of larger effect in terms of incremental change in what we do. So with this in mind, I'll hand back to Amy and to the panel, and we look forward to hearing more from each of the speakers about their curatorial practices and how they've embedded accessibility into their methodologies across exhibitions and public programs, and importantly, audience development strategies too. So thank you and welcome.
Thanks, Michelle, and especially to the whole Artspace team. So let me welcome my panel with me on stage. So we've got Maddie Stewart, comedian and producer of Crips and Creeps and Are You Pulling My Leg? Luke Letnew, the curatorial and collections team lead at Casula Powerhouse, and Rilke Oakley, artistics program leader at the Blue Mountains Cultural Centre. So the theme of the panel today is accessible curation. Now, this is a very vast topic with endless possibilities of exploration. I want to also start the panel today by acknowledging that we're all on a learning curve. Sometimes we might stumble over language or hold differing opinions, and that's okay. The beauty of these conversations is that it is a platform for us to learn from each other and to share our experiences and to grow as an art sector. Our ultimate goal is always to make the arts more accessible and to take steps forward towards creating a more inclusive and welcoming space. With that in mind, also, there's going to be a QR code at the end of the panel, the last 10 minutes, which you can scan. It'll be on the screen. Oh, look what I prepared earlier. You can use that to ask questions via Slido, or you can just raise your hand and a mic will come around. That's for our in-person audience, but Slido is on the screen. Oh, look, my streaming team at the back just gave me a thumbs up, is on the screen right now, so you can also ask questions at the end. Okay, let's kick off the conversation, and I'm going to start with you, Luke. During your time at Casula Powerhouse, you created some significant disability-led exhibitions and public programming, including Adaptation in 2020, Animate Loading in 2022, and Paradoxes of Paradise in 2023. Could you share more about the artists featured and the concepts that shaped these projects?
Thank you, Amy. Yeah, so when you invited me to be a part of this panel, I kind of was a bit surprised because I don't really think about didn't really sort of think that I had a kind of a creative access or a focus on disability art practice as a particular stream of my curatorial practice, but it has been really interesting to sort of go back and to think about some of those projects a little bit more, and it's been quite nice actually reflecting on those projects. And I guess where it kind of all started for me was a genuine interest and curiosity in the work of Pat Larder. So at Casula Powerhouse, I look after the exhibition program of temporary exhibitions, but I also manage the collection. And in the collection storeroom, on one of the kind of the first racks, I've always been drawn to these two works by Pat Larder. One is called Jelly Bean Blues, and the other one is called Pink Glow. And they're about kind of 50 centimetre by 25 centimetre paintings. They have these really kind of colourful, kind of pink and blue gradient backgrounds with these iridescent colour block collage elements and these thick, fat, gooey, glittery kind of swashes across the surface. And they're glittery and they glisten and they shine and they always made me happy. So I really knew, one day I was in the collection, I just was thinking I would really love to build a show around these works. I didn't really know that much about Pat Larder's work. I think the first time I came across her work was here in the public body exhibitions a few years ago. And in my research, I came to understand that those works came into our collection through an exhibition that Joanna Mendelsohn had curated in the early 2000s called Larder Family Values. So the exhibition surveyed both Pat and Richard Larder's life and career. Richard also being a really significant artist, one of Australia's, I guess, most important pop artists. And so the exhibition looked at their life and their career. And through that process, I came to understand that these two works of Pat's were actually from the later part of her life, and were the consequence of an adaptation. So she had a chronic knee pain that she was dealing with all her life, but as she was getting a lot older, it was getting a lot more difficult for her to manage just the simple standing and painting and preparing canvases and doing that kind of the hard labour on that side of the painting process. So she knew that she needed to find a new way to work. She was really interested in finding a way to work where she could sit down and work on a flat surface. And this also coincided with her moving to Roos. So this was, I think, like the 80s, and at the time, Roos didn't have a contemporary art scene. There was no contemporary art supplies stores. She only had these fun craft stores, which is where she found this kind of gooey, glittery material. And this gooey, glittery material could only be applied on a flat surface. And I think this was a bit of a eureka moment for Pat, because it meant that she could work in a way that was better suited to her body and her body's needs. But through that process of adapting to the body's needs, she opened herself up to a new kind of material, a new way of working. And I found that to be a really inspiring process, because it's a process about contemporary art, you know. It's material, it's process, kind of coming together to create a new concept. And so through this research, I found this to be quite beautiful, because I knew there were other artists who were doing a similar thing, where they were thinking about their body and listening to their body through a process of making work, and needing to adapt the process of making work to better suit the needs of their body. And the first point for me was Louise Zhang, who was an artist who I have a long professional working relationship with. And I know that this is not something that she was including a lot in like artist statements or anything, but naturally she was jumping between painting and digital painting, because she also has sort of a chronic pain in her wrists, which obviously makes painting a difficult process to maintain. And so she was naturally jumping between the two processes. And the painting practice was informing the digital art practice, and the digital art practice was informing the painting practice. And so between Pat Larder and Louise Zhang, I knew that there was an interesting kind of collection of artists that we could bring together around this sort of process of listening to the body, caring for the body, and allowing innovations in your art practice to occur when you're kind of respecting your body. And I think this is an interesting project for me as well, because it it speaks to the idea that the body is not a static thing. All of our bodies will age and change and evolve, and that what the artists were doing is just something that we all have to do in different ways in our lives. So it's a project, really. It's a contemporary art project that is interested in process and the evolution of practice. And then it just sort of naturally included artists with disability because it was the easiest way to tell that particular story. So yeah, I guess that's
How it started.
how it started. Yeah.
I mean, adaptation is an interesting through line, and my next question is to Rilke. So last year, Rilke, you curated the exhibition Sensorial at the Blue Mountains Cultural Centre, offering visitors an immersive experience and engaging multi-senses. Traditional gallery settings often limit audience engagement to the visual, yet our daily lives, we utilise all our senses. So could you tell us about the significance of this exhibition and how such approaches enrich audience experiences?
Sure, thank you. So the starting point for Sensorial was myself wanting to touch work whenever I go to a gallery. And as a gallery professional, I know I'm not allowed to do that, but I still want to. And as well as that, I also have a number of people in my world who won't come to the gallery I work at because it has really reflective sound, it's really noisy, there's a cafe, there's a lot of noise from that, and they don't find it a space that's comfortable for them. So I was looking at multiple things and wanting to have work that was touchy-feely, moving away from the primary experience of sight, where we go into a gallery and we look, maybe we listen. I wanted people to be able to touch things or just experience them, like lie down, go into a gallery and lie down. So I worked with some neurodivergent artists who were already making work that fit what I was looking for. I curated some existing work and then we also commissioned some work. We were lucky enough to get the Dobell exhibition grant, which helped. And we also have an art class called Inspired by Art that runs at the Cultural Centre, and I commissioned that group to make a collective work. Their work was particularly impressive, joyful, engaging. They all made pieces of bodies, bit like a leg, a torso, a head, an arm, with Velcro on it, and we had a whole wall laid out with Velcro and people could come and build their own body. So this became a really, really interactive work. Most of the works were, and people were able to create whatever body they wanted. There was another work that was an underwater experience. 3 autistic artists who also are scuba divers, and they do a lot of their own self-soothing and comfort by going scuba diving. So they created a work where we had a screen on the ceiling, a mattress that was really comfortable, weighted blankets, so you could, and they also made it a, not VR, but, sorry, I'm going to forget the word, stereoscopic. So you had to wear the glasses, you lay down, you put the weighted blanket on, and the experience was to be as if you were under the water watching the ocean float by. So a lot of the works were incredibly immersive in that sense. There were a couple of works that people weren't allowed to touch, and that got complicated. There were, in terms of audience engagement and people interacting with the space, we had, there was a lot of things to learn regarding that, because as soon as you took away that expected rule or boundary of you're not allowed to touch, people wanted to just do everything. They wanted to touch everything. The work that was the Velcro piece, instead of just putting it on the wall, people were throwing it on the wall. We have portable walls that are 60 centimetres deep, and I had to climb in the walls and rescue pieces out of there. Families would come with their children, and rather than... We observed that the parents who obviously needed a break and just sat down and let their kids do their thing, the kids would take one work and engage with another work. So we had one of Bailey Lobb's inflatable coloured balls, and one day I found a whole bunch of work inside the ball. So it was so those were challenges. Those were the challenging things of developing a show like that.
I think that's nice, though. I think when we curate exhibitions within spaces, we always think, like the arts. I mean, we think through, yes, all the artworks should be cohesive to follow a theme, but they can't interact. So I kind of like that they interacted in a weird way. It's like meshing the artworks together.
Look, that was an interesting exercise. I have to sort of put it that way. It did create a lot more work for our volunteers and our staff to reset the gallery at the end of every day. Some of the works were supposed to be interacted with, like the piece on the wall. There was another piece with that was a really sort of meditative piece with a whole bunch of kitchen objects, teapots, cups, platters, and then some fabric, and you sat and you wrapped a piece like binding or wrapping an infant, and then placed it on a shelf. That work would need to be reset 3 or 4 times a day. We had so much engagement with it. But ending up with a teapot in a work that was supposed to be soft, that was complicated. Yep.
And did you encounter, while curating the exhibition, any misconceptions regarding sensorial, such as the belief that it is designed exclusively for people who are neurodivergent or people who have disability?
The main misconception that we came across was people called it the kids' show. So it was from some of our volunteers and some of the local people who come regularly, our local visitors, called it the kids' show, and could we have another one, and could we have a permanent kids' show? It really fulfilled a need for families, and some families did spend a lot of time in there. We have a lot of homeschooling families in the mountains, and there was one family that would come and spend the whole day and do their school day at the gallery, which was amazing. We are looking into creating something that is more permanent, that is interactive for kids. But again, after COVID, there was issues around hygiene. If people are all reusing the same fabrics, we had to wash things quite a bit. There's a lot of maintenance involved in that show. Having said that, the main takeaway really was a sense of play and joy, both from the artists but also from the visitors.
I think that's a beautiful takeaway, even if you needed more staff to have a bit of a clean-up crew. Next, I'll ask Maddie a question. You created Crips and Creeps, Sydney's first accessible comedy club. Firstly, can you tell us what an accessible comedy club is? And we'd also love to hear about any unexpected challenges or surprises you encountered during the club's inception.
Yeah, sure. I use the term accessible comedy club as, loosely. No space is fully accessible, but I do my best. So Crips and Creeps, Crippers and Cripple, I'm not in a gang. It kind of started with the idea of, I heard of my friend Oliver Hunter, a brilliant comedian in Melbourne who's a wheelchair user. He's so good at his craft, but he had nowhere to rehearse, nowhere to practice, nowhere to grow and, fail as well. That's the beauty of comedy clubs. You try new things. And he was just expected to do a show every year for the festival. And I thought, that won't do. We need more accessible places. And I thought about access as quite broad, because Crips and Creeps is for all marginalised people. because comedy is inherently not accessible, for not just for people with disability, but for all people who are, dare I say, different. You know, like comedy is sexist and racist and transphobic and homophobic. It's awful. It's an awful industry, and I don't know why I do it. It's the love of the craft. But it can be, this is what I'm saying. In its darkest moments, it is that. And I thought, that's not gonna do. I want to have a career in this industry, and I want my friends to feel safe, and I want my audience to feel safe and nurtured. And there were no clubs like that available, so I just made one myself. I had no money. I had no producing experience. This is my first thing that I made, and I was so lucky to have so many people willing to help me and teach me. Sean Sweeney, who runs Sweeney Interpreting, is actually one of the big pushers and supporters of Crips and Creeps. He taught me a lot about how to make things accessible for deaf community. And at the beginning, we didn't have any money, so we got students to come and do their little 5-minute sets and do, you know, comedy, and they'd be tested on it. Is that right? Was there assessments? I'm looking at Will because Will was one of them. No assessments? Okay, but it was like practice for your Auslan school. And so I don't know what else to say. That's how I made it accessible. That was the answer to your first question.
Yes.
Accessibility is around one, accessible venue,
yes,
and two, kind of slowly growing community.
Yeah.
Trying this access out, and then slowly developing and introducing more and more as we go along.
Yes. Yes. And I hear that it might be touring now.
Look,
little
it's touring.
promo.
I'm going to do a selfless plug right now.
But wait. Let me ask my question.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
I hear that it might be touring now. And what does, like, I think we think of accessibility being such a stagnant thing, but actually to tour a show or an exhibition and having accessibility embedded into that, what does that mean for the artists who you're working with?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked, Amy. That's
worries.
a great question. So Crips and Creeps has kind of developed a bit further. We have all disabled lineup rather than a mixture of different marginalised groups. All disabled comedians touring all around Australia this year. It's called Are You Pulling My Leg? That's the show. You can find it. There's tickets available. Just Google it. So the way that we make that accessible is we have soft deadlines to begin with. We try to make things as easy as possible for the comedians. We have access riders. They're very important. Some comedians had never heard of an access rider. They've never voiced their needs in their workplace before. I think mostly because comedians don't think of these dingy little basements that we work in as workplaces. There's no HR in comedy. No one's checking in. But I think it was quite dramatic for them. It was a big change. They were like, you care about us. You care about our needs. You want to look after us. Because I think there is this ingrained thing as performers where you don't want to complain because you want to be invited back. And so that was nice, and we cater we got a lovely bit of funding from the government to pay for us to travel. We are also collaborating with Accessible Arts, and we train the venues that we go to in our tour to make a sustainable change in the industry, so that moving forwards, more people can tour and go to these places and feel supported and comfortable. And also the audience members, they have, staff members available who know the access. They advertise more accessibly.
Cool. That sounds awesome.
Could I just state before we go along, because the first question you said was there something surprising?
Yes.
That I realised. Yes. I would like to state the most surprising thing with Crips and Creeps was the amount of people who'd come up to me after the show and say, oh, I've never met a disabled person before. Like, I've never heard them speak, or they'll say, I've never seen a trans person before. I've never met, what other marginalised group I had on, like they'd never met, and they were so shocked that we had opinions and thoughts and jokes. So I found that quite surprising.
I have no words.
There we go.
Luke, back to you. This is a tricky question. How do you approach the complex challenge of balancing artistic vision with the needs for exhibitions to be accessible to diverse audiences?
Oh, great. I think that's kind of embedded in everything that we do at Casula Powerhouse. I mean, Casula Powerhouse, for those who aren't familiar with Casula Powerhouse, we're based in Liverpool, which is about 45 minutes from the CBD. Liverpool is one of the country's most culturally and linguistically diverse councils. I think people speak over, there are people who have come from over 140 different countries and speak over 140 different languages. Our community is incredibly diverse in age as well. There's a lot of families tend to be quite large. So when we're, and the Casula Powerhouse Arts Centre is a multi-use space. So we have a number of exhibition spaces, we have a theatre, we have rehearsal spaces, we have education spaces, we have a restaurant. So when I'm thinking about audience, that audience is really, really diverse. I mean, people are coming for very different kinds of reasons. Casula Powerhouse also serves a lot of civic functions for council. People get their citizenship ceremonies, they happen at Casula Powerhouse as well. So there is not a single audience coming to Casula. And so when we're thinking about how can exhibitions be presented to audiences and communicated to audiences, we're really thinking about how do we make the exhibitions, how do we create the most generous and hospitable entry point, a welcome to the exhibitions. So all of our text is quite simple. It's pitched at like a very smart 10-year-old. The exhibitions really try to reflect different parts of the community. So we do sort of culturally specific exhibitions, but then we also try to just incorporate a real true diversity in all of the projects we do. If we're doing group exhibitions, it just naturally has to be because for the audience to feel like they want to come into our gallery, for the restaurant goer or for the person getting their citizenship ceremony, we want to make them want to come into the exhibition. So if we feel the programming can reflect the diversity of art practice around the world, if the language is inviting and accessible, if the exhibitions are quite different from each other as well, that's just an important way of approaching the space. And then I guess to the first part of your question, the managing artistic excellence, was that?
Yes.
Yeah. I guess
Vision,
yeah. So while like Casula Powerhouse is very sort of community focused and that local community is our first audience, my role is to be a contemporary art curator. So I guess my job is about making the exhibitions dynamic and diverse and reflective of the community, while also kind of speaking to what's going on in contemporary art. I mean, one of the recent projects that you mentioned in the first question was Paradoxes of Paradise. I think that's a really interesting example of how we can support the artist's vision and also support it to be engaged with by an audience. I mean, that exhibition was curated by the Creative Hybrids Lab, which is an international collective of artists who are organ transplant recipients. And their art practice reflects that experience through their art practice. For each of these artists, it's an ongoing curiosity and interest in communicating and sharing those experiences through their art making. One of the challenges of this project was the international nature of the artists meant that they didn't really have a local audience. And so a way of trying to support, those artists to be experienced with our local audience was to incorporate local creatives in the development of a lot of those works. So we paired an artist with Curious Works, which was a resident company at Casula Powerhouse who supported filmmaking practices. So one of the artists was supported through the filmmaking editing and recording process through a collaboration. We also brought in Harmony and C, which was a local choir, to perform at the opening event. And we also incorporated sort of, I call them like talking and busy hands and talking workshops, where they're kind of crafting workshops where, you know, it's weaving and threading and needlepoint, these kind of repetitive actions where, you know, as an audience or a participant, they require, you can put a lot of attention into it, but you can also do it without putting that much attention into it. So it opens you up to talking if you want to talk and sharing. But then if you don't want to talk to anyone, you can be like, oh, well, I'm really focusing on my needlepoint here. I don't need to talk to anyone. But those sorts of workshops just make the space hospitable and welcoming. And I think that is really one of the greatest challenges and exciting elements of Kusula. How do you make, you know, very different kinds of audiences come together and want to engage with contemporary art? And I think, you know, inviting them to participate, inviting local people to support exhibitions so they bring their audiences. But then also one of the things that we did with Paradoxes of Paradise was trying to put the art in the community. So one of the artists in the exhibition, Dylan Mortimer, was coming from the States. You know, one of the simple realities, transporting work internationally is very expensive. So we got the work to Sydney, which was wonderful. And Dylan was very generous in wanting to donate 4 of his works into the local hospital. So Liverpool Hospital does organ and tissue extraction. And they have offices where they have some of the really difficult, complicated meetings with people to talk about that, you know, what happens to the organs and tissues. We have a relationship with the hospital, and the hospital took 4 of those works, and they're now on display in one of the waiting rooms. So, you know, those people who are in those waiting rooms having, you know, not a very great experience will be surrounded by Dylan's work. And if you don't know Dylan's work, he loves glitter. And he loves like graphic
glitter.
shapes.
Loves glitter.
So it's work that will make you, you know, smile, or it's a joyful work. It's a very spiritual work. It's very tender and beautiful work, and it's just like a really beautiful project and way of sort of supporting audiences to engage with really complex work. I mean, that exhibition had, you know, glitter and spectacle, but it also had really minimal works. It was flashy and inviting, but then also thoughtful and considered. And for an audience at Kusula, I think it's always important to have layers of engagement. There is the, you know, the simple, most shallow form of engagement. There's an opportunity to engage deeper and then deeper and then deeper. Paradoxes of Paradise was a great exhibition for that. But it's the challenge of the job as well.
I mean, organ donation, such a heavy topic, and you can say it and people can be like, oh yes, I support that, but then there is these complex layers around organ donation. So it's nice that the exhibition had that and had those conversations. My next question is back to you, Rilke. So Sensorial brought together neurodivergent artists and collectives from across Australia and New Zealand. This kind of plays off of Luke's kind of response and question there, but how did you go about selecting the artists for the exhibition, and did this process shape the exhibition evolution?
Yeah, so I started locally. Most of our exhibitions, in-house curated exhibitions, require a certain proportion of local artists, and I had the idea of the Inspired by Art group and to work with them, and I knew a couple of other artists. But then I just went looking. I saw, I think, your show at Granville.
Thank you.
And went down there with my then 9-year-old, and he ended up in one of Bailey's balls, so that's the hero photo, was his head. And from there I started talking to artists and looking at what people are doing, particularly around the idea of sensory. So it wasn't so much about disability, it was about senses, other different senses, and to have that immersive experience. So what were artists doing? What else could we do in this space, particularly to make the experience more comfortable for people who found it quite harsh and loud and reflective sound, but also touchy-feely, colourful, fun, those were things I was looking for. And in like every artist or exhibition you go to or speak to, then, you know, you find another 10 to go research. So I'm obviously always limited by budget and space and practicalities. So I fit as many people in there as I could. We did want to commission several works and were able to do that with the funding that we got. But we also borrowed existing work, like the Liam Benson colourful piece and Bailey's work. Bailey, actually, we borrowed the one work, but also she made a new video. I don't know if did you come and see the show?
I did not.
So Bailey,
I saw it online. It was great.
So Bailey made a work. So she's got these big, beautiful balls that she describes as like being inside a sunset. We had the orange one, and there's some blue ones. Some are small, some are huge. You go inside them and you experience colour from within it. We also put it on top of a carpet because, like most galleries, our floor is concrete. It's not very comfortable. So we were able to put a bunch of carpets down so people could sit or lie or be on the floor. And then she also made the work, it's called Dancing Hands, and it's her hands moving when she talks, sped up or slowed down, I can't remember which, but from her point of view. So the camera is at her, I guess, eye height. And it's really, really beautiful. Even kids would come up and actually copy the hand movements. So we didn't have every single thing that you could touch and feel, like physically, but that work really also connected to people in a similar way.
Yeah, playful. And Bailey's inflatable artworks, she describes them as like sensory like profiles. So you go into the different ones and they're different colours and they're different shapes and sizes, and you have a different experience depending on all those factors. So they're really beautiful work. I'm a big fan. Look her up. So now I have some questions for the whole panel. So anyone feel free to jump in and answer any of these questions. So my first question. So often we see artists with disability represented within exhibitions that have a disability focus. Why is it important to include artists with disability in all types of exhibitions? Please answer.
Just going on from what I was saying, from my point of view, I start with a theme, an idea, something that's generally come out of the recent conversations around contemporary art, and then I look for artists who illustrate that. So obviously including a range of different artists is important, but also I'm always looking for those who are pushing boundaries, pushing the current dialogue, and that at the moment really does seem to be in that space, in the disability space. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it just comes for me. It's comes back to my sort of general approach to curating exhibitions, especially group exhibitions, and ensuring that, you know, we're not perpetuating sort of pre-existing art narratives. We're trying to add layers or add depth, add more voices to the conversation, and especially in kind of my own experience developing exhibitions around the body and bodies and space, it just organically occurs that artists with disability play a role in that experience and exploring those ideas in their practice.
Cool. Ads?
Oh my goodness, what a question. Is it about, what was your question again?
So often we see artists with disability only represented in shows about disability experience.
Yeah.
And why is it important to curate artists in all exhibitions?
Well, that's silly, isn't it? Because we're all humans, isn't it? Aren't we all living in like a human experience? And we're so intersectional, and there's like we overlap so much. Like, So, I mean, what do they say? 20% of Australians with
20.
disability?
Yeah.
I mean, I call bullshit. I reckon it's more, and people are in denial. I think there's so much intersectionality that it would be silly not to just blend a whole heap of different humans. As long as the artists are supported and you're looked after, I think that's what matters. It doesn't matter if you're in an all-disabled lineup or an all-disabled exhibition. If you're looked after, it's a good job.
Very true. Okay, so now let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture. The future of art. We're witnessing a cultural shift in how we create, exhibit and interact with art, as we've seen from Sensorial and other exhibitions. Even in access, we're seeing more artists and curators embrace creative access. So what is the benefit of this change for audiences and artists?
Shall I jump in? Great. I was just going to say, I love inbuilt access. I think it makes the show more exciting. If we're thinking about performative elements, the shows that I've written, like from my experience as a comedian, shows that I've written with an Auslan interpreter are often far better for deaf community and are more enjoyable. And it's a challenge for me. It's exciting, isn't it? Like, you have these brand new tools and materials to play with. If you think of access as, you know, your paint or your material, it's just like another element to play with. And it can be really exciting. And it can also be really, really lovely and enjoyed by more people than you'd expect it to. When I was working for Sydney Fringe and we created Limitless, which is an accessible hub, we had a lot of accessibility built in. We had a sensory space as well, and the amount of people who didn't identify as disabled just loving and thriving in that sensory space and realizing that they actually need that in their life. You know, you start to question, oh, maybe this accessibility thing is not just for people with disability, it can help me in my daily life, you know. I think it's great to build in accessibility for many, many reasons and benefits many people.
Yeah, and thinking about it as, I mean, we talk about at Accessible Arts, creative access, which is thinking about access as an artistic methodology. It's going beyond just adding it on to a like existing work. It is embedding it from the start and thinking about that as, yeah, creative.
And it can add to the show. Like if we think about Back to Back and how they interacted with captions in their show Shadow, I believe, and they had captions going along the top, and they were like, no, we only have captions because we're disabled and you think we need captions. And it was a really funny moment is what I'm saying. And, you know, access can be, more than just a tool for, you know, people with disability. It can be really exciting and fun. I'm preaching to the choir, aren't I?
Can I just jump in there regarding access, the experience of Sensorial, and how in the neurodivergent visitors that we had, some of them wanted to be really loud and some of them needed quiet. And so I became very aware that I wasn't going to be able to provide the perfect space for everybody at the one time. So I think that's a really important conversation for galleries and curators to think about, that everyone's access needs are different. And I know from my participating with Accessible Arts that obviously if you make things more accessible, then that works for more people. What we did was let our community know when the most quiet times of the gallery were naturally, which was once the cafe shut. So from 3:30 or 4 in the afternoon, it was generally quieter. So people who didn't want to be around crowds or noisy people could come then. We also used some signage just for families, because some families would just let their children run and yell and scream. And so we were trying to educate people that although this space was different now and the normal gallery rules had changed, it was still a public place. It was still an art gallery. It wasn't a park. It wasn't a soccer field. So there was this education needed of our audiences, and I think we have a lot of work to do with that. If I would love Sensorial to tour. I'm looking at funding. But that is an area I will have to work with other galleries on to just to help audiences navigate that change, and the galleries as well. So yeah, I know that's a bit of a segue, but anyway.
It's a good point though, thinking about what are the limitations and opportunities of a building. Casula is like a disused power station. It's concrete, it's hard, it's cold, but there are lots of pockets. And so when we're programming for that space, we've really tried to make it comfortable for people and inviting for people. So that's having as much seating as possible, as much ottomans, chairs with arms, with backs. Our space is not air conditioned or climate controlled, so it's very cold and very hot, but we have some cooler and some warmer spaces. So just really like highlighting those for audiences. Some of our spaces can be kind of contained and quiet, but it is a concrete building where sound bounces and echoes. So for us, it's really been about thinking about the space, trying to be as upfront with audiences when they enter, give them a bit of a rundown about how the space is used and how it works, and just being able to share that knowledge, which is also, I mean, when working with different artists has been kind of quite revealing. Rihanna Head Toussaint, when we were doing the animate loading, was so amazing in providing so much information for audiences, how to get to where we need to go and how much time things will go for. It's not exactly sort of the creative access, but just kind of thinking about how an art centre, in curating in an art centre or an organisation, you can be as generous for your audience as possible, which will make people be able to choose and decide what they want to do and what they're up for and what they're not up for. But if you're up front with them, then at least they know.
Yeah, transparency and education, I'm feeling the vibes with. So before we have our audience questions, I just want to ask the most important question of the day. Who are some of the artists with disabilities that we should be highlighting, whether they're from New South Wales, Australia or overseas? Let's shine a bit of a spotlight on these talented artists.
Oh my goodness. Well, my favourite artists are in the room. Of course, there's you.
Oh,
and
don't!
And of course, there's Daniel and Angie and Sujo, who I just love and I'm obsessed with. I don't know. I have so many artists.
Comedians.
Comedians. Oh my goodness. Everyone who's on Are You Pulling My Leg? No, as I mentioned, there's some brilliant comedians out there. Alexandra Hudson is going really, really well. She won Raw last year or the year before. She's just excellent. I recommend her. But there are plenty of disabled comedians, far more than when I began. I am very happy I have enough to tour with now. Before there was only like 2 of us. Now there's like 30.
Wow,
yeah.
that's awesome.
Oh yeah, but I think that's who I'd recommend. And any comedy.
Luke?
I think a part of supporting artists is providing ongoing support. So I'll highlight some of the people who I've actually worked with. So I think Mariam Conroe was in Adaptation, Oni Blue, Prue Stevenson, Bruno Booth. They were all artists I worked with back in 2020 during the peak of COVID, so they didn't get the greatest experience working with Casula Powerhouse, but they're all really amazing artists. Rihanna Head Toussaint, I worked with a number of times.
And you did a show with Deborah Keenahan?
Deborah Keenahan. We presented a solo show of her kind of last, I think, 5 to 10 years worth of her practice. And then she came back the following year and performed a one-woman show as part of Sydney Festival. So Casula Powerhouse has been a big supporter of hers.
It was a great show.
Can you also put my name down for those recommendations as well? They're good. You thought about this, I didn't.
I went to the people who I'd already worked with, but they're still worth checking out.
And Rilke?
Well, similarly, I would look at any of the sensorial artists, particularly Bailey Lobb and Prue Stevenson. I think I didn't get the pleasure of meeting Prue, but her work is just amazing. And Bailey as well. She's a New Zealand artist, but also sometimes lives here. So
She went to uni here.
oh, okay. She went to uni here.
I went to uni with her. That's how I know everyone.
Yeah, she's quite amazing. Alison Bennett, who is a lecturer at RMIT and did the submersive underwater stereoscopic film. She's also amazing. Her practice is really diverse, mostly in film and photography. She worked with a woman called Megan Beckwith. Again, I hadn't met Megan, but she did all the stereoscopic stuff, and they're kind of going off in another kind of realm of work with that new media.
Stereoscopic is so interesting. I don't even know what it means. You've been saying it all panel, and I'm like, yes, stereoscopic.
You got to wear the glasses, and then it goes 3D.
So it's different to VR?
It's different to VR. It's like 3D, but they call it stereoscopic. Honestly, I don't know the difference either.
Is it like old school 3D, like you used to get in the Kellogg's box with the blue and the red?
You wear the blue and the red glasses.
Oh, like a magic eye.
Yeah, but it's film.
Oh, yes. Tour this show, please. I need to see it.
Is Art Space interested?
Now we come to audience questions. Oh, we've already got one.
To quote one of the panel members who said, artists with disability get relegated, I'd like to ask the opinion of the panel on the idea about major art institutions having a specific access department, which, in my view, ring-fences disability, whereas I feel that disability should be part of the mainstream activities of the gallery to encourage incorporation of the disability section into both the curatorial side and the audience side, and a way of most educating the 80% of people, and you yourself said, I've never met anybody who's disabled.
That's what my audience
said.
The
80% of people who need, those are the people that we have to influence, and also the accessibility of encouraging those people to take part in things that maybe have been designed for an audience with disability, for example, tactile, or description, audio description of works. I mean, I don't know whether you've ever been in a room where you have a sighted audience and you get the reaction of the people who are listening to audio description, which is not designed for them, but suddenly makes accessible some of the things that they really need to understand to change the complete inequity of the disability section. And if I may say so, accessible curation should be very much part of the mainstream, not separated out into the disability sector. Your views, please.
I was like, is there a question?
I guess I agree. Yes, we should be doing more, including more. And for example, our accessible art class is for anybody, and we have a range of people who participate in that class. So the people who made the work for sensorial, some have disabilities and some just wanted to go to that class and participate in an art class that was on that day, suited them. I actually don't know. But so those people who choose to participate in that class are going to learn about the art making experience of the other participants. I think I agree with you. I think we should be doing more.
I think you're right that everything should be kind of blended together. There shouldn't just be kind of like segregated in one little spot for disabled artists. But at the same time, I do see the niceness in that. As a person with disability, sometimes I don't want to be vulnerable or creative around non-disabled people, especially if I'm talking about my disability. So sometimes there is a place and a time to have those little moments as a community that we can get together, just us, and feel heard and understood amongst each other. But it shouldn't be the only thing on offer. You're right. There should definitely be we should be part of everything, as I said, human experience. But yeah, I think there is an importance of having some events that are strictly for people with disability. Yeah. What a politician answer. Yes and no, both.
Do we have an online question or another audience question? Do we have any online questions? Okay, what about an in-person question? Anyone got any other questions? Oh, wow, we've got a very silent audience.
I have a question. If no one else wants to ask a question. Often organisations like ArtSpace is an example of this. We lead with our program, exhibitions, public programs, etc. And you talked about slowing down, as like one of these kind of methods to enable artists with disabilities to participate in programs. My question is really kind of more about the back of house. Do you think that the back of house culture needs to be almost indivisible or aligned with that kind of practice of what we're leading with front of house? It's almost like a self-evident answer, really, but I'm kind of thinking, because we do have to, it does take time to change our organisational practice. So how critical or crucial is that kind of allowance in the back of house, to make change for the slowing down for the front of house activities or the more public-facing activities?
Could I answer this? It's not an individual organisational kind of approach. I think it's an arts sector approach. I think it's about funding as well. So funding deadlines are so tight, and that makes us as organisations have to work within those tight structural deadlines. So it is a top-down, it is a cross-sector approach, but what do our panel think as well?
I love the mention of funding because it's that slowing down. I think it's so important just for programming generally. I think to have really long, to be talking about 2026, 27, 28 would be lovely because every project needs to gestate. Every project needs time to kind of fall apart and come back together again. Every project needs to be kind of pitched in a really good way. And I feel like as an art sector, we're so kind of fast moving. We artists are pitching an idea and having that idea kind of delivered within that 12-month period. But this kind of comes back to one of the questions that we were going to ask, which was our budget. Sorry. But
we had to cut some, all right? There wasn't enough time.
But what I find really hard is when we're constantly kind of on the hamster wheel, just kind of running and running and running and running. Like we're losing so many opportunities to make projects better, to really understand what the scope of a project is, to be ambitious for our projects, to be ambitious for our audiences, and really put all of the things in place to allow things to be realised at the where we want it to be. And I find when we're always on tight deadlines, there's always a surprise kind of cost. There's a thing that pops up that you need to pay for, and this isn't healthy for anyone. It's not good for the artist to have to deal with the uncertainty. It's not good for the institution to not be properly planned for what a project needs to be. So I kind of just went on a rant. I don't think I actually kind of answered your question.
I think, Maddie, you talked about earlier soft deadlines, like having artists have soft deadlines. Does that help? Or?
Obviously, I'm a sole trader. I work alone a lot of the time. But when I was working for Fringe and we had a big company, I started to embed access just sneakily under the radar. I'd force it in there, and everyone would just have to deal with it. And it seemed they liked it. So I think it's an education thing. I think people think, oh, that's not for me. I'm not going to put it in place. But once they've got it, they don't hate it. They love it. They're like, we don't need a sensory chill space in the office, but once they've got it, they can't live without it. So all I'm saying is maybe we know best.
And that's the end. Big thanks to our awesome panelists. Oh, wait.
There was a tiny little question.
Can we do one more, Liz?
Come on,
Come on, Liz. One more.
Oh.
Can we do an online question for our online audience?
Oh, there's an online question.
Yes. Can we do that?
We have quite a list here, so I'll go for the top voted one, which is from M Sunflower. As an artist with disabilities, I identify with having to adapt materials to my body a great deal. How do we encourage the rest of the art world, and as a consequence, the rest of the capitalist world, to embed disability principles from the ground up and from the top down?
Man, I hope there's an easy answer to that one. That would be great, wouldn't it? Retraining capitalism. I think that Melbourne Fringe did a great version of this. I know that my experience of this is that there was a comedian in Melbourne who was chronically ill and was unable to perform the dates that they had booked. And so there was this really soft, and they knew that there was a potential of them not being able to perform during the season. So the whole festival just went, okay. And they were just like, they knew when you purchase tickets that it could be malleable. It's like, this may happen, it may not, we'll let you know on the day. And that's just how they sold the tickets for that show, because it was the need of the artist. And without the artist, there's no show.
So transparency.
Yeah, transparency. They build it in really early on. It's like the sharing. We talk about how sharing of information is important for disabled audience. It's important for non-disabled audience. We need to organise our lives. It's great to have extra information. So yeah, to have that built in, it worked for her.
And I was just going to add consultation. We consulting with the people involved, the people who are going to be affected by that show. So working with Accessible Arts, getting the information to make those changes is, for organisations, is really helpful.
Yeah. I think that also leads to your question as well, Michelle, like consultation as well with the artists you're working with. Okay, there we go. We're cutting it off. Sorry, everyone, with all your questions. Big thanks to our awesome panellists for such an insightful and dynamic conversation. And now I just want to invite Liz Martin up to the stage to close the event. And then we've got some cheeky snacks up the back. So stick around. You can ask your questions then.
Pause. Awkward pause. Would you like to join me in thanking the panel? So a massive thanks for sharing your time and your insights and your knowledge. Deep thanks to Luke Letuno from Casula Powerhouse, Rilke Oakley from Blue Mountains Cultural Centre, Maddie Stewart from Crips and Creeps and Are You Pulling My Leg, and generally about town. A huge thanks to Amy Claire Mills, artist and luckily our Arts Development Manager at Accessible Arts. A massive thanks to Artspace for having us in your newish space. Big thanks to Michelle Newton, Yuan Lee, Marco Rinaldi. A massive thanks to Live Crowd for streaming us into your homes and workplaces. A massive thanks to our supporters and funders, the City of Sydney and Create New South Wales. I'd also like to just announce, as of about 10 minutes ago, our new program launched. And we'd love you to help spread the word. So, Equip Leadership Toolkit program is a unique and comprehensive career development and leadership program designed for women and non-binary people with disability or who are deaf to develop skills towards becoming influential leaders in the arts and cultural sector. And screen, I should mention, screen sector as well. It's actually a national program, so please share it widely with your friends, your colleagues. Let's help get the word out. It's for 16 lucky participants, and they'll all be coming to Sydney later in the year to graduate. So we're super excited. Please check it out online. Equip. I do encourage you to... technology is amazing. To complete our survey so we know where we're nailing it and where we can improve. That would be fantastic. You should have it at home as well as be able to do it here, in the tech. And if you're here in the room, please stay for a cup of tea or a coffee. There are snacks. They look delicious. We'd love to talk with you. It's an opportunity to meet each other. If you're online, I'm sorry. But it's been really lovely having you stream in. And lastly, I encourage you to keep an eye out for the next one in our series, which I can tell you, sneakily, will be at the STC and is on disability storytelling. So that'll be in July. Looking forward to seeing you then. Thanks for coming. Thanks for making the time. Looking forward to chatting.